From Quito, Ecuador, my name is Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South, the midday news brief from Telesur English. And we begin this new edition right now. We begin in Venezuela, where two former heads of the state-owned company, PDVSA, have been arrested in a major crackdown on corruption in the country's most important industry. The Attorney General announced the arrest earlier on Thursday morning for Eulogio Del Pino and Nelson Martinez. Del Pino was also Minister of Energy until the beginning of this week. In total, Tarek William Saab said 65 PDVSA managers have now been detained and are being investigated.
Therefore, early in the morning, Nelson Martinez was placed under arrest due to his presumed ties to the debt refinancing contract by Citgo Petroleum Corporation. The signing of this contract happened without the approval of the government. Likewise, at around the same time, Eulogio Del Pino, former PDVSA president and oil minister, was placed under arrest by officers of the military intelligence. The preliminary assumptions in this criminal case assign the presumed responsibility of Eulogio Del Pino in their corruption schemes at Zamora regarding sabotage in the oil fields that affected Venezuelan joint venture with the regrettable loss of 15 million barrels a day and property damage estimated to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Those arrests came after President Nicolás Maduro announced on an unprecedented clean of PDVSA. We have more on this report.
The fight against corruption led by the Venezuelan Attorney General has been relentless. Since Tarek William Saab took over the prosecution service 4 months ago, some 65 managers of the oil company have been arrested. President Nicolás Maduro has made this crackdown on corruption his flagship. He told an assembly of PDVSA workers that a big cleanup was coming.
We found direct links with the U.S. Embassy in Venezuela, aiming to damage our oil industry, to cause what I call a silent strike in the oil sector, reducing production, reducing refining, paralyzing the refineries with very well presented excuses, which just makes me even more angry.
Maduro mentions real mafias that have been trying to cause a disaster by stealing the country's crude. On the other hand, workers and former workers have denounced the corruption that was concealed for years by those in charge of PDVSA.
We definitely need to transform PDVSA. Why? Because as everyone knows, PDVSA came from the transnationals. We have a 100-year history of oil production, and there are still managers and methods from the old PDVSA.
All this information coming out about PDVSA is information about Venezuelan oil, and of course about Venezuela's economy. And it's not just these groups, but also some powerful groups that have been working to keep the oil policy-making system and the oil structures, financial decisions in PDVSA. And as we now see in these corruption cases, this has mostly to do with the awarding of contracts.
Destroying PDVSA from the inside by pushing from the outside in order to bankrupt Venezuela and take control of its resources. That would be, according to some experts, the goal of all this pressure on the most important company in the country, the one that guarantees social resources for the people. Destroying PDVSA would mean, in practice, putting the country with the largest oil reserves in the world in the hands of transnationals.
And all
the transnational companies, the US and European ones. But we're talking especially about the US ones, because they are the ones that control Venezuelan oil for more than 100 years. Through Standard Oil and then Chevron, ExxonMobil, well, these companies are trying to take back the control of Venezuela's natural resources by making PDVSA unable to exploit its own resources or even export them.
Corruption cases, like the embezzlement in the Orinoco oil belt, the Zamora case, or Citgo's fraudulent contracts with 2 vulture funds, have cost Venezuela millions in losses at a key moment, just as the country is restructuring its foreign debt and suffering the pressure of US sanctions.
The arrests also coincide with the new head of PDVSA and Ministry of Energy, Manuel Quevedo, traveling to the OPEC summit in Vienna, where Venezuela is arguing for an extension to the agreement on production cuts. On Wednesday, Quevedo met with the General Secretary of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, Mohamed Barkindo. He arrived in Austria just days being sworn in as a president, the midst of the corruption scandal affecting the state oil company and its subsidiary, Citgo. Our correspondent Frederick Gillingham joins us now live from Caracas. So Freddy, what is the significance of these arrests? Have there been any reactions to the announcements?
So these two arrests this morning is obviously a major development in this anti-corruption investigation, this PDVSA purge that has been ongoing for months now. During the press briefing with Tarek Saab, which was briefed at around noon today, he highlighted the significance of these arrests. It has emerged that arrests estimated 15,700 barrels of oil a day have been lost as a result of corruption within PDVSA from the period of 2014 to 2017. This is due to bad maintenance of the facilities and mismanagement. I mean, Venezuela's oil production accounts to around 95% of its export earnings. So the arrests of these two major figures could explain the reasons why oil production has slumped so badly in recent years. We were present at a workers' assembly on Tuesday. This was the inauguration of the new leader of PDVSA, Manuel Quevedo. There was a very jubilant atmosphere on show on that day, but also concerns were raised by fellow workers on where the new direction of where the company was going. A need for restructuring the internal management of the company was raised by fellow workers, but most importantly, a huge sense of unity was felt, and this is exactly what Maduro and Quevedo are after at this transitional time for the company.
Thank you, Frederick, for that report. That was Frederick Gillingham from Caracas. Protesters have taken to the streets of Tegucigalpa, Honduras, to rally against presidential candidate Juan Orlando Hernández, who has declared victory over his contender Salvador Nasralla. Security forces deployed tear gas against Nasralla demonstrators who set tires to fire and marched against the alleged manipulation of the presidential election results. Several people were reportedly wounded. Overnight, the results released by the Supreme Electoral Court suddenly showed a lead for President Hernández. With just over 90% of the ballot boxes counted, the latest numbers show that President Hernández has 42.68%, while Salvador Nasralla of the center-left opposition alliance has 41.6%. On Tuesday, Nasralla had a lead of 4%. Our correspondent Heather Geese is at a protest in Tegucigalpa right now and joins us on the phone. Heather, it has been a very confusing and dramatic 24 hours in Honduras. Can you explain to us what exactly the situation is?
You're right, Carla. It has been very confusing. Tensions are continuing to rise. As you know, earlier this week, voters received results from the Supreme Electoral Tribunal that showed an irreversible lead for Salvador Nasralla with nearly 60% of the votes counted. Then that started to quickly change. That margin of victory was quickly diminishing. And now we're in a situation where President Juan Orlando Hernández is actually ahead of Nasralla by 1%. So those results, those official results from the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, go directly against the irreversible trend we had seen earlier this week with the partial results, and we're now sitting at 90% of the vote counted. So there's a lot of uncertainty. Tension is continuing to rise. The supporters of the opposition alliance were celebrating their victory. Salvador Nasralla has declared himself president. The National Party and President Juan Orlando Hernández have also declared themselves victorious. But the tension is continuing to rise. Right now, I'm outside of where the votes are being counted here in Tegucigalpa, There are burning roadblocks in the streets. There are not thousands of protesters like we've seen at other demonstrations, but there are a lot of protesters here, mostly students, and the police are being very aggressive towards the protesters. So it really seems like confrontations could be about to break out.
And do you know anything on what the opposition is saying or planning right now?
So we heard some pretty strong denunciations from the opposition alliance's Salvador Nasralla last night. Yesterday, he was holding a press conference to present the opposition alliance's count of the scanned tally sheets that all the parties have. So he's saying that the results that the Supreme Electoral Tribunal is releasing and the results that the National Party is referring to do not coincide with the scanned tally sheets that are in possession of the Liberal Party and the opposition alliance. Now, during that same press conference, he also accused the Supreme Electoral Tribunal of trying to manipulate the results and steal the election for President Juan Orlando Hernandez. Earlier in the day, Salvador Nasralla had signed an agreement with Juan Orlando Hernandez at the request of the Organization of American States, agreeing that they would respect to the final results from the Supreme Electoral Tribunal. Later that evening, Nasralla retracted his signature from that document, saying that it was completely invalid and had been a trap. And he said he will not respect the results from that tribunal, and he will respect the physical tally sheets. There's a lot of concern about the Supreme Electoral Tribunal being balanced. The president of the tribunal, David Matamoros, is an active member of the National Party. He previously served as a member of Congress for the National Party, and he was also previously General Secretary of the National Party. So those party lines are well known, and there's fear from the opposition that the body divided two magistrates recognizing the irreversible trend for Nasralla and two magistrates allegedly trying to manipulate the results. But there are widespread accusations and suspicions of fraudulent and manipulative behavior taking place, and that's why Salvador Nasralla has said that he will not recognize the results if they hand victory to Juan Orlando Hernandez. And he's also said that his supporters and he will be in the streets until the Supreme Electoral Tribunal recognizes that he has won the election.
Thank you, Heather, for that report from Honduras. Please keep safe. And we'll be coming back with more news in a minute. Stay with us. The former president of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, has accused the current government of preparing a coup after President Lenín Moreno ordered the electoral authority to hold a plebiscite. Many members of the ruling party see this as an attempt to roll back the achievements of Ecuador's citizens' revolution. Telesur's Pablo Vivanco has been at the news conference given by Correa today and sent this report.
Since Tuesday, supporters of former Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa have been gathered outside of the País movement's offices here in Quito, Ecuador, to show support for Correa and his leftist party. País became bitterly divided after Lenín Moreno, who won the April elections as candidate for País, took office. Correa and his allies have accused Moreno of taking the party in a rightward shift. Now, speaking to international media today, Correa accused Moreno of staging a coup after the Ecuadorian president ordered the electoral authorities to move forward with a controversial referendum, which, despite the fact that there is a ruling pending from the Constitutional Court. Here's what Correa had to say.
I hope Ecuador and the entire world understand we are facing a coup. They want to call for an unconstitutional referendum by intentionally ignoring the Constitutional Court's report, which is mandatory. Why? Because they know that the questions in that referendum are unconstitutional and wouldn't have been approved by the Constitutional Court. This is very serious. A violation of the Constitution is happening. A coup is happening. I hope that the international press tells the whole world about this serious situation. They may have brute power, but they are not right. They can unconstitutionally call for a referendum. They control the police and army, who take care of the logistics for election processes. But everything that is being done is absolutely unconstitutional. They are violating the Constitution.
Correa also detailed what he's calling political deals between Moreno and the court and insisted that at least 2 of the questions are unconstitutional. After Moreno issued his decree, the head of the National Electoral Council, Juan Pablo Pozo, resigned. This is something that a lot of people are saying is not a coincidence. This weekend, both factions of País will be holding meetings as the political differences in the movement have spilled over into organization ones. And Correa and his allies are determined to finalize Moreno's exit as the head of the movement. Despite Correa returning to the country in order to participate into this Congress, he insisted that he is not going to be returning to the country and will dedicate his coming years to his family in Belgium. Pablo Ivanco, Telesur, Quito.
The Bolivian President Evo Morales has confirmed he will seek a 4th term in 2019. He said he made this decision in response to interference from the United States, which had asked him not to stand. Social movements have been celebrating this decision to allow him to run again. More details in the next report.
The Constitutional Court's decision to allow candidates of elected authorities to run for re-elections was accepted unanimously by its members.
The court is allowing all these people to run, but Bolivians are the ones who will ultimately decide.
The political opposition immediately rejected the decision and called on the population to reject it and vote no in Sunday's elections.
This Sunday there will be a strong answer against those who are promoting a coup.
Social movements that have supported President Evo Morales' call to be allowed to run for president again have led massive mobilizations throughout the country, and they have called for the people to accept what the majority chooses in 2019.
This is pro-democracy, for everyone to be able to run, for us to see in 2019 who's the one who truly has popular support.
So we are very happy. We are sure that in 2019, the Bolivian people will elect who will be our president.
President Evo Morales thanks social movements and those who insisted for him to run for a new term.
I only want to say to those people who not only care but also act, I salute them, I respect them, and I admire them. We are part of the people. We will always be with you, accompanying you to keep working the way we are doing now.
The Constitutional Court's decision is based on Article 23 of the Inter-American Human Rights Convention that recognizes the right of people to elect and be elected without any type of restrictions. The resolution allows the re-election of president, vice president, mayors, and governors.
Members of the National Labor Union for the Aviation Industry of Panama have denounced the layoff of 50 Copa Airlines employees who participated in a strike against the company. The union insisted that Copa Airlines broke multiple labor laws by carrying out massive layoffs in retaliation for a strike against unfair wages, and after a non-reprisal agreement was signed by the 2 parties to protect workers' rights.
Copa Airlines is a company that doesn't respect union rights. Some of the workers that were fired are protected by Labor Law number 59 because they didn't even participate in the protest. They were on vacation, or some of them had the day off. But they have been judged as they were part of the strike, violating their rights.
During a press conference in Washington, D.C., Mexican Economy Minister Ildefonso Guajardo said that demands by the Trump administration for a U.S.-specific automotive content requirement in NAFTA was not viable. Guajardo said that the U.S. is trying to increase the regional value content requirement for NAFTA produced cars and trucks from 63% to 85%, which is unrealistic. Guajardo also declined to confirm if Mexico would offer a counterproposal. 29 people have been sentenced to life imprisonment in Argentina for human rights violations committed at a clandestine detention and torture center during Videla's dictatorship era. The trial involved some 800 cases of kidnapping, torture, and murder during the 1976 to 1983 dictatorship. Former Argentine Navy Captain Alfredo Astis, known as the Angel of Death, and Jorge Acosta, the Tiger, have been sentenced to life imprisonment. In addition to the life sentences, 19 people received jail terms of 8 to 25 years.
We agree that these trials should move forward, despite how Macri's government continues obstructing the path of justice. But besides that, hearing the words life imprisonment for two of the main pilots of the dead flights, it really brings up mixed emotions. I don't know if the right word is happiness, but we're celebrating that this is happening.
Canada has pledged $78 million for reconstruction and climate resilience in the Caribbean over the next 5 years. The announcement was made by Celina Cesar Chavez, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Ministry of International Development, at the recent Caribbean Community and UN High-Level Pledging Conference in New York. The 2017 Atlantic hurricane season and the Category 5 storms caused extensive damage to several Caribbean islands. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. The White House has just reaffirmed that Rex Tillerson remains the U.S. Secretary of State, despite these reports of his oncoming departure. We are now joined by our correspondent in Washington, Jorge Gestoso, to learn more about what happened. Hello, Jorge. So we've been hearing rumors that the whole day about Trump's alleged plans to replace Tillerson with Mike Pompeo, the current head of the CIA. But now that has been denied. What can you tell us more about it?
Well, Carla, what is official is that Sarah Sanders, that is the press secretary of the White House, has said, and I quote her words, "As the president just said, Rex is here." Rex Tillerson continues to lead the State Department. What the New York Times is reporting this morning is that the plan to replace Rex Tillerson by Mike Pompeo has been designed by the Chief of Staff of the White House, John Kelly, and the rumors are that should be triggered by the end of the year or early next year. On the other hand, the Senator Bob Corker says that he believes that it's not going to be any ousted of Tillerson because it has been speculations that he could be being replaced right away. The presumption is that he's going to stay until the end of the year at the least, and could be replaced next year. But most definitely, always there have been tensions between the President Trump and Rex Tillerson. And most definitely, when rumors were going on that on more than one occasion, Rex Tillerson was referring to Donald Trump as something called like moron. So we have to wait and see.
Thank you very much, Jorge, for that report. That was Jorge Gestoso from Washington, D.C. Now, more than 1,000 Bosnian Croats held a vigil in Mostar for Slobodan Praljak, a wartime commander who took poison in a UN war crimes courtroom on Wednesday. Praljak, who was 72, had commanded Bosnian Croat forces during the 1992-95 Bosnian War. He was handed a 20-year sentence in 2013 as part of a group of 6 Bosnian Croat military and political officials found guilty of committing war crimes against Bosnian Muslims. Some Croats still see him as a hero.
I, along with all members of the government who were here, sincerely regret this act. It shows, I think, such a degree of conviction of Slobodan Praljak that in everything he did it with the goal of doing good for the Croat people. I can't think of any act similar to this. I don't think something like it ever happened.
Now here's a roundup of some other stories from around the world.
The European Union, United Nations and African Union have agreed to an emergency plan to dismantle people smuggling networks and repatriate stranded migrants in an effort to ease a human rights disaster in Libya. This is after a CNN report earlier this month showed African migrants being auctioned off as slaves by Libyan traffickers.
We took firm decisions on the immediate evacuation of refugees, setting up a committee led by the African Union's Commission on Human Rights, assisted, helped by the European Union, pursuing smugglers of human beings, and we consider this smuggling a crime against humanity. And also, the various countries must put in place special forces to fight against smugglers of human beings.
Palestinian rival factions have delayed the handover of power in the Gaza Strip by at least 10 days. The delay has caused some to fear that this recent landmark deal to end their decade-long feud may be set to fail.
The delay does not benefit the people. First of all, every moment we are waiting for reconciliation. We want to achieve reconciliation as quickly as possible. The people have less than nothing.
The reconciliation didn't fail and will not fail. Hamas will continue until the end to make the reconciliation succeed. This is a strategic decision. We will not step back. It is required from the government to apply the agreements it made until the process is complete.
British Prime Minister Theresa May has criticized U.S. President Donald Trump over his recent tweets. On Wednesday, Trump retweeted tweets from the deputy leader of a British far-right group. Trump hit back at May, tweeting that she should focus on terrorism in Britain and not on him. Pope Francis is in Bangladesh after a diplomatically sensitive trip to mainly Buddhist Myanmar. The Pope met with Bangladeshi President Abdul Hamid. On Friday, the Pope is expected to meet a group of Rohingya refugees.
And now we've come to the end of this midday news brief. This and many other news, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And also you can join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.